Art's a strange thing, how it affects you. Because as much as we like to define it in a very objective way, ultimately, it is subjective how something affects you. Your perspective on life, your knowledge of something, and just how you feel in that day even is really how something impacts you. This is my series Underrated Classics, where I talk about films that I think have been overlooked or underappreciated, be it financially, critically, or just how the public perceives them, or even how many people know about it. What's weird about this film today is it's a very recent film. Most of the films I talk about came out a while ago, at least a decade or more. This film, on the other hand, came out in 2012. It's a recent movie. So talking about its reputation is odd for me because in the years to come it might grow and become a bigger cult classic and more people might know about it. It's still very early on. Movies live on forever. They don't just end the year they come out. So I might have to take this video down later if this film ever gets more popular. But um, the reason I picked this movie is because I think it should have been an instant classic. I think it's a movie that should have been like the indie darling of the year, did really well, possibly got a couple Oscar nominations. The reason I say this is because of the filmmakers who made this, Jonathan Dayton and Valerie Faris, who had the huge hit Little Miss Sunshine, which was a film that cost $8 million and made $100 million worldwide, won a couple of Oscars, was very acclaimed, very popular, and that's a film I find to be very overrated. If I was writing, uh, if I was writing a video for an overrated classic, if I was making a video for that, Little Miss Sunshine would probably be one of those movies. But I'm not here to talk about Little Miss Sunshine. I'm here to talk about um, this film that they made that I think's great, and I think just kind of overlooked for some odd reason. This is Ruby Sparks, starring Paul Dano and Zoe Kazan, who is the granddaughter of the legendary Elia Kazan, who was a famous theater director and film director. You probably know him most for Streetcar Named Desire, just off the top of my head. So she used to date Paul Dano in real life, and she wrote the screenplay about a young author who had a really successful book come out years ago, and everyone called him a genius. And he's been kind of in a creative lull for a few years now. He's having a rough time trying to write his next book. He had some bad breakup that we don't really see much of. We just hear about it from his friends and family. And he attempts to write the perfect girl. He attempts to write a girl that's absolutely perfect for him, and that creates Ruby, which she comes to life from the pages. Now, this isn't an original premise. There's where the writer can affect the world, the real world, with this writing. This goes way back. This has been an idea for a long time. Recent films that have dealt with this, though, Stranger Than Fiction with Will Ferrell has a premise very similar to this. There was a John Candy movie where he writes a soap opera that he's living in while he's writing it. So it's on new, but I love what Ruby Sparks does with it, and I actually think this is a very well directed film too. And I've watched it 4 or 5 times. It's one of those movies I show people. I'm like, dude, you got to watch this movie. It's one of those movies that sneaks up on you, right? But what I love about the movie is it. I think what a lot of people don't like about it, and it gets a criticism for this, and I think it's just misinterpreting it. The film gets a lot of flack from what I read on certain forums and such, that it's just your typical pixie dream girl movie. This guy creates the pixie dream girl, and she comes into his life, and she's perfect and all that, and it's all just to build up Zoe Kazan's ego. She's the new Zoe Deschanel. In fact, I even pitched this movie to my friend one time and said it's got a red-headed Zoe Deschanel in it, basically, because Zoe Kazan, just like Zoe Deschanel, is like a hipster goddess. She was recently in that movie The Big Sick, and I like her face. You may not like her. I like how she looks. I find her very attractive. I'm also a big Paul Dano fan. Also, just one thing, there's a horror-esque sequence in this movie that reminded me so much of Death Note, where Paul Dano's character setting and just writing, he's getting he's mad, so he keeps making her do all these things, and it just reminded me of Light in Death Note. Like, I kept saying, Paul Dano in another life, if he was a bit younger, could have played this part. But here's why I think it's a misinterpretation. Ruby Sparks is not about the pixie dream girl. It's a deconstruction of the pixie dream girl and how it doesn't exist. There is no perfect girl or perfect person. In many ways, this is like High Fidelity, where the lead character has to find out that it's his fault that his life is the way it is. and it's his fault that his past relationships didn't work out. It's not everyone else's fault. He just blames everyone else, and subtly builds this guilt up, and he keeps trying to make Ruby this perfect person, this person that he can manipulate and control, because in his mind as an author he can't do that. He's an artist. He is God on, when he writes. You are God as a writer. That is what it is. The characters will do whatever you want them to do. But this shows you the difference between art and real life. That is how art and movies and stories work. That's not how it is in reality. In reality, people are complex, they're messy, they make mistakes, and it's tough. And that's the thematic thread throughout the whole movie. It's even at the finale. He's reading a speech he wrote about his newest book, and the speech he's giving is basically commenting on this about J.D. Salinger and Holden Caulfield being alive on the page, this living entity, this thing that exists, and that's what we're kind of getting at here, is that we obsess over the art itself to a point that we believe, a lot of us, that it is real. We get way too caught up in who actors are as characters, not the actors as the person they are in their everyday life. We get way too obsessed with sequences and the way things unfold. Even films that are based off realistic things are still done in make-believe, in a fake way. This is why I very much agree with Tarantino, what he said in an NPR interview. The one thing that really does affect him that he doesn't like seeing in movies is animal death, is animals getting tortured and mutilated and stuff like that. And I have that too, because it is supposed to be make believe. It's supposed to be fake. So when you see something actually happening with real fear, that's not supposed to make you get the feelings of it without doing it, the illusion. When you actually see something scared or getting hurt, it's a different experience, because you're not going to see the fakeness of it and being caught up in it being a reality and going, wow, they tricked me, they got me, they fooled me. Instead you go, wow, you just filmed an animal getting killed. It's like watching an amateur porn versus a professional porno, where they're clearly, they have the blocking and the actress and the positions are all the same way, and you could tell they kept changing the camera angles, and it was all about getting the good shot, not for comfort. When amateur porn could just be a guy on top of a girl for, a few minutes and whatnot, doing 2 or 3 positions, and it's not that loud. That's probably closer to what most people's sex life is like. Ruby Sparks, well, God, it's just it's so engaging to me, because when it starts, you think it's just about the schlumpy writer hipster guy. He's such a stereotype, but Dano's perfect in the role. And then when she comes into the movie, it becomes this really wonderful romantic film. It's very beautiful, and it's got this great sequence at a pool where she goes, "I'm a mess," and he says, "I love your mess." And they enjoy each other more and more, but eventually she starts to drift away from him. She wants to go do her own thing. It's clear she's going to break up with him, because she's not seeing the value that he brings to her. All she's seeing is all this value that she gave his life, all this meaning she gave his life. And then so he keeps trying to make her better. He tries to fix her. He's like, just make her happy all the time. Then she becomes like a bumbling buffoon. She's like a child. Then he just tries to make her sexual. He keeps trying to change her and make her, and it just makes it worse and worse and worse, until she's not even the same person anymore, and he doesn't know what to do, and this just frustrates him. And she has to abandon him. She has to leave him, right? And I won't spoil the ending and how it all wraps up and all that and what happens, because really the whole struggle in the movies are they going to end up together, and what's going to happen to Ruby? Is she going to disappear? If the paper gets destroyed, does she disappear? What happens? Is she going to die if anything happens? There's always this sense that it could turn into a horror film. It really is. There's always this underneath the surface. You're like, man, if this just went one direction this way, if this went a little bit this way, this would be a horror film. This would be scary. And it could really twist and turn what he could do with this ability he has with the typewriter, and because it seems to be that the typewriter has the powers, is from what I get. It's his typewriter lets him do this. And the great thing about this, they don't explain it. That's how you should do movies like this. Don't explain it. Just let the fantasy exist and tell your story. It's just the chemistry these two have. It does feel like a real relationship, and then it feels very true to probably why they broke up or why they didn't stay together, and it feels very personal from Zoe. And I like movies where the writing and the directing is personal. It is just someone speaking in their voice about their life and their world. And the film's just, because even if you don't like the film, or if you love the film, at least you're getting this person's view on things. You're not just getting them copying everyone else. Sure, this is, you've seen stuff like this before, and you could always throw out the generic, it's like a lot of mumblecore indie films. It's like a lot of Woody Allen stuff. But I still think this film finds fresh ways to these things. I think this is actually better than 500 Days of Summer in a lot of ways. And 500 Days of Summer is basically about the same thing. You know, like the perfect girl not being real and the guy realizing he has to make progress in his life and not be defined by a woman making him happy. But like I said, I like this film better because I think it's more subtle. 500 Days of Summer relies so much on Mark Webb's direction and kind of this music video editing and all that. Ruby Spark just exists. It feels very real, and like I said, it slowly sneaks up on you. You know, it's not about having an explosive first half. It's about having a final 20-15 minutes that really gets you. Now, I will say a few flaws of this movie. There is a plot line, a subplot with his mother and her boyfriend and all that just feels kind of dropped and doesn't really get as fleshed out as it should. And I wish they'd done more with that. But that's a minor nitpick. The meat of this movie is this guy and his brother and this girl and all that. And it's all wonderful to me. I think the dialogue hits. I think the comedy is. It feels like comedy that would be real in life. It doesn't feel like forced writing. The stuff that's romantic is very romantic. And when it gets dark and more deep in a way, I think that's when the film really becomes truly engaging. And I love the music score. Oh my god, this is one of the best scores. I people really, not just the movie being underrated, the score. But let me I'm really just giving you a plot synopsis. Let me just say what I like about it. I love Ruby. I love Ruby in a way to where I think I love Zoe Kazan, but Zoe Kazan isn't Ruby, and Ruby's not real. Ruby's just someone he wrote, that she wrote, that is living in this film, but she's a character. She's not a real person. She might be based off a real person, sure. And it might make me, it might remind me of past relationships I've had, and it might remind me of girls I know, or that I've loved, or that I still love in some way, that still have a piece of my heart. And what this movie's ultimately saying, I feel, with its ending, what I find beautiful about it, and why I think it is a classic, and why I keep going back to it, is because it conveys this emotion that I've often felt. As someone who loves movies, I love Ruby like she is real. I love her and look at her in a way like Paul Dano's character. I love her in a way that I would love a real woman, but she's not a real woman. So my love is artificial, right? It's not real. It's fake. It's me being manipulated by the movie and the camera angles and the lighting of it and all that and the editing and the music. Of course, yes, that's what movies do. But life's not that different. Life's really not that different from that. It's kind of the same thing. See, I love Ruby, right? And let's say if I knew Zoe Kazan and I loved her. Let's say that I was in love with her, right, in real life. I don't think they're different. I think it's the same thing. And I think that's what Ruby Sparks is getting at. It's not that the pixie dream girl is necessarily always just a myth, or that art doesn't always have to reflect life and vice versa. It's really that the pixie dream girl is perspective. Anyone could be your pixie dream girl, because what's perfect for you isn't perfect for everyone else. And if I love a character in a book, if I feel for them, if I want to be with them, if I feel like they're my friend, if I feel that way about a comic, a movie, a painting even can do that, to where I feel like I am there and I understand them and they understand me, and it's familiar, and every time I watch that movie it's like hanging out with my friends again. That's the beauty of art, is that it makes your life more fulfilling. Well, also life makes movies and art and all things more fulfilling too. They complement each other. And if I love this movie, and this is what I'm getting at, it is subjective. Like I said, I'm not saying this is objectively a great movie. And if you don't like this movie and you think it's crap, and I'm just being a little hipster boy and all that, that's fine. That's totally fine. You can dislike this movie. I don't like Little Miss Sunshine. A lot of people love it. Everyone's different. I'm just saying that's how real life is too in a lot of ways. It's subjective, and you can't tell me who to love and not love, and you can't tell me what's overrated or underrated. I'm not saying I'm the authority on this stuff either. I'm just saying these are my personal feelings. But the big reason I picked this is because it really summarizes in a lot of ways. It makes the point better of why I do this series, is because movies are ultimately for me about feeling in a lot of ways. That doesn't mean you can't praise technical stuff and what you find to be objective things. Like, yeah, that's a good shot, of course. But I love this movie just like I love a lot of things in my life, and I love and stuff I love doing, and vice versa. And every time I watch it, I fall in love with it again, and then I get my heart broken a little bit when it's over. But then I think to myself, heartbreak is not sentimental, or any of these things are not sentimental when they're true to you and your feelings. When you actually feel that way, it's not just being cheesy and emotional for the sake of it, for to be manipulative. It's actually how you feel. So I'm just saying, with absolute truth, I think Ruby Sparks is a classic for myself, my truth, and I love Ruby. And even though she isn't real, she is.
What if you get sick of me?
I won't. I promise.